mag-reflect ka rin ng sarili mo. Okay, and what are you going to reflect? You're going to reflect on what are my strengths? What do I have to give this company? Okay, what is that thing that I can shine on? Okay, the other one is what's my weakness? What are those things which I don't know or I'm not good at? Okay, and then you look at what is this company looking for? Okay, so you try to match it, no? Ima-match mo. Again, with all authenticity, no? Hindi mo naman bobolahin yung tao kasi that will come out. No? And believe me, B, if you made bola and kalusot, when you get there, you're going to have a lousy time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Loop Me In. This is the podcast for job seekers, young millennials in the workforce, for the go-getters and the visionaries. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, and Podbean. So in Loop Me In, we will discuss the new opportunities in the job market, trends, and innovations in different industries, and we will loop in thought leaders in different industries to pick their brains and listen to their inspiring stories. By the way, this is Jules Rodriguez, and I'm co-founder of Plastic Tides, and our nonprofit organization is on a mission to clean the rivers and seas, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire world. So, I can still remember the time I experienced my first job interview. I was wearing a nice suit and tie, slacks and leather shoes. I'm applying for a job as an account manager for an advertising company. My dad brought me to the company office. The aircon was at maximum level, but I was sweating like crazy. So I got out of the car and approached the guard. I logged into the guard's little blue notebook and went to the elevator. So I entered the office and saw the employees, and they were wearing loose shirts, pants, and sneakers, pretty comfortable. Even though I was wearing nice clothes, I did feel like I was naked. So the receptionist led me to a room. I was there waiting for about 15 minutes, but it felt like the longest 15 minutes of my life. The interviewer entered the room, and he was also wearing a pretty loose shirt, pants, and Converse Chuck Taylors. So I was prepared for all the typical job interview questions that I researched on the internet. But his first question was definitely a curveball. He looks up into the distance, and he goes, "What the hell is that smell?" And I pretended not to smell anything. But then he blurted out, "My God, what's that smell?" Then I sniffed my armpits. I sniffed around a bit without really raising my arms. And I figured, oh my God, that's me. So I was so embarrassed. But it felt like the interview wouldn't start if he didn't figure out the source of the smell. So I just said, "Sorry, I think it's my deodorant." So I was flustered, and all the questions that the interviewer asked, I couldn't seem to answer with confidence. It felt uncomfortable when he kept on touching his nose just to lessen the strong smell of his deodorant, of my deodorant. Obviously, I didn't get the job, but I learned a lot in my first interview. So this is Jules, and don't worry, that was not my story. It's actually the story of my producer. So we laughed all day after hearing that, but job interviews, they're a hit or miss. They're pretty scary. But don't worry. What we'll do is we'll help you prepare for your job interviews in our episode today. So for this episode, we're looping in one of the 100 most influential Filipinas in 2017 by the Filipina Women's Network. And she's also a recipient of the prestigious People Management Association of the Philippines and People Manager of the Year in 2013 Her career in HR spans some 35 years, where she had various leadership roles in HR in both the Philippines as well as the Asia Pacific region. Her latest post was the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer of the Bank of the Philippine Islands and the Executive Director and Chief Sustainability Officer for BPI Foundation, where she retired in 2017. Today, she has reimagined herself as the chief flamethrower and managing partner for Kickfire Kitchen, as well as the board president of Center for Strategic Reforms of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, to discuss the truth about job interview questions, we are looping in Miss Faye Corcuera. Hi, Miss Faye. How are you doing?
Hi, Jules. I'm great, thanks. And thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I really do feel like your experience will be able to enlighten a lot of the people also who are listening to us. Because as you know, we're hitting this whole global pandemic craziness, and people are really looking for inspiration and also a little bit of an updated version to what's going on in the industry. So it seems like you really do have a lot of your on your plate right now, Faye. So after BPI, all of this came on. How do you feel? Are you always on your Zoom now? Are you always on the computer?
Yeah, I believe, this COVID thing is, I look at it as a gift in many respects because it's given us an opportunity to actually uh, almost reinvent the way we do work, right? So from face to face, of course, I do miss a lot of that face to face, meaning physical presence, now into a more digital aspect. So it's given us actually, at least me personally, given me a lot of opportunity to try to invent almost and rethink how to do things now, whether it be in consulting work, because I'm doing a lot of consulting work now, or in just even training, right? Even training, stuff that I do now includes a lot of that. So I believe that you don't really retire. You don't, like say, okay, bye, I'm going to shut off for the day. I think being active and contributing to the world remains basically part of one's life. And you don't retire. I say you retire, you change tires. So it's almost like having just a different act or a different scene, but the focus and the mission remains the same.
I love it. I feel like it's really like, how Rambo never retires.
Exactly.
You always just get pulled back in. There's this quote from The Godfather: just when I
Yep,
thought I was out, they pull me right back in.
exactly.
That's the beauty nga, if your value is really skill based, because I think the one of the misconceptions for people is that work is age based, but in reality I do personally feel it's really the skills that you can add and use and combine with each other that gives a person their ability. So I wanted to ask you, this really stood out for me: what is a chief flamethrower, and what is the vision of Kickfire Kitchen?
What's your imagination when you think of flamethrower?
Okay, can I be really honest?
Yes, be honest.
I imagine you, Faye, kicking the door down, shooting a flamethrower into the air, going, "Come on, everyone, let's get this started."
Exactly that. Exactly that. So it is to invoke, it's to provoke, it's to make people think differently, it's to kickstart something which is inside you. The ignite, the word ignite, ignite the flame that I believe everybody has that flame inside. So that's why there's no such thing as, for me, there's no such thing as age, okay, being
Hmm.
old or retiring. I think that fervor, that fury, that wonder is always in people's hearts and minds, and it's an attitude. So it's all really how you approach things.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do agree. Some people, like, they can be middle aged, but then they still act. I mean, I know some people my age who act like they're already so old and they've given up on life. I'm not judging. But yun nga, parang there is a fire that remains to be either dimmed or strengthened in you as you go through. So it really depends
I,
on how bright you want to burn, I guess.
I like your analogy of it can be dimmed or it can, um, what's the word you use?
Brightened.
Brightened.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like
I
that.
like that. Yeah, that's nice.
So I feel like that's the image that came clearly into my head, especially with the term Kickfire Kitchen. So I want to know Kickfire Kitchen. I love the name. Can you do you mind expounding also on what you push for?
Okay, I'm going to just say one little thing first before that preamble. I actually started my own company called Flip It. Okay, so imagine Flip It, right? So you can see how I think. It's really flipping things around and not doing it the same way. So it's actually almost. You know how we're so hardwired, we need to short circuit that at times. Our brain is hardwired a certain way. Okay, so it still exists, but what I did was I was always working with a group of young millennials and run Gen X. No, um, they had the company called Kickfire Kitchen. So because we were always working together, I said, yeah, why not? No, so I joined them as a managing partner, and it makes so much sense because you what you do is similar. So it's a matter of almost like getting all that energy together and being a bigger fireball. So what's a chief flamethrower? As you said, it's strategist. It's invoking. It's participate. It's co-creating and enabling what we call 21st century skills, and co-creating with organizations and individuals and teams, basically future ready cultures. So we're future proofing people.
I think
That's what
that's
we're doing.
when you mentioned to me flip it, I did imagine essentially creating paradigm shifts in people. Parang I think part of also integrating someone into a group or an effective team really does require also a sort of um, indoctrination into the mindset of the community just so that they would understand also terminology, ways people communicate, and just kind of get them up to speed.
Right.
So I do feel like that's really where the challenge is now for a lot of companies because there's still some of them are still using super archaic methods of managing their people. But then in reality, especially if you're working with a millennial workforce who has, we've made so much noise about this that there is an environment that millennials thrive in, and sometimes much older companies don't see that just yet. So this is where I do imagine the blending of this type of work. One of your projects that you did spearhead was the BPI LEAP and Ayala LEAP program. And of course, I heard this program was actually presented in Harvard. So can you please tell us more about this project and how this helped the workforce of BPI and Ayala?
Okay. So BPI, as you know, is one of the oldest banks. Okay. So speaking about really stability and that's one of its core competence, right? The ability to actually survive and thrive even though years have passed. But of course, it brings with it uh, a older type of a generation or a generation that's retiring. So when I was actually invited to come in, maybe because I came from technology, so I do have a very iterative and a more advanced, more progressive way of thinking, and that's one of the things that the bank wanted to do. So what we did was because we had like 60, 70, almost 100 people retiring. Okay, and when people retire, that's actually a lot of talent going out the door. And if you're not ready, it could be a big negative impact on you. It will have negative repercussions. So we built this, and at that time, which is several years ago, it was leading edge because we brought in Harvard mentors, Harvard gurus, okay, into the halls of BPI through online classrooms. Okay, so we basically simulated the Harvard case study rooms in Harvard, but through video conferencing. Okay, so now you think, oh, okay, you have Zoom and you have all this stuff, but at that time, which was several years ago, it was I mean, I tell you, you think Harvard would be top notch, but at that time they were like, when I visited, they had these huge TVs, they weren't doing flat screens. So it was, it was fascinating because we didn't do the typical online work. Okay, it was beaming in, literally beaming in our Harvard professors into the halls of BPI, and this was something that started off as a training for making sure that we train up a new breed of officers, because we were going to lose a lot of officers. But what happened was was not just training per se, but it became basically almost an organizational and cultural development type of thing. So it was so successful that we trained up about 100 officers, and I had a huge budget. Actually, it was in the millions of dollars, and it came at a time because my CEO then, Gigi Montenola, was very counterintuitive. It came at a time where people were saying, no, we can't do any training, because at that time there was a crisis going on. It was the mortgage problem. Okay. So people were like closing off and not doing any training, but we said, no, we're going to do it. We're going to be ready. Okay. So fast forward, yes, we did bring it to Harvard. It was a case. It was presented. And because it was so successful, the Ayala Group also basically adapted it, and we still use it up to now. Of course, in a more updated manner. But nonetheless, we've been able to democratize leadership development, because you know how much a Harvard education costs, right? So it's quite a lot of money, I mean, even advanced, executive education will cost 3 to 5 million pesos. And we were able to do it for 100 officers, so just imagine.
Yeah.
But not at that cost, so yeah.
I think it's nice that you really did leverage the classroom effect, and the challenge that you really did have to overcome as well was really the technological difference. What year? When was this? When was the first one applied? The BPI.
2009. So that's more than a decade ago.
Yeah, and I mean, even until now, my internet's terrible. So, I mean, everyone's internet slows down. So imagine even then, to be able to have a consistent connection, to even get the message across. And I think imagine putting a group of people in a room and trying to maintain their attention. That's also the part of it that really is the challenge.
Yeah, but you know what was really fascinating was we ran it in multiple sites. Okay, so This was very advanced. I mean, you think about it, we were leading edge. Even in Asia Pacific, it was leading edge because we had multiple sites. We had Dagupan, we had Batangas, we had Cebu, okay, and of course Makati, all at the same time. 8 a.m. in the Philippines, which 8 p.m. in Harvard, in Massachusetts, right? So that's how we were, and it's real time. Okay, so it's real time. It's not recorded, it's real time.
So you're essentially telling me 10 years ago, you were doing exactly what companies are only learning to do now.
Yeah, and it's so funny because there's a joke around. I mean, coming from tech, and you know how companies have always said, hey, we want to become digitalized, it's going into the 21st century, the fourth industrial revolution, and also and so forth. And it just took COVID. This is the joke. It took COVID just how many weeks to get companies suddenly, with a digital strategy.
I just thought of this idea that the challenge now for people is to really understand it, or understand being taught without the human element involved. You're not physically there. All you're reliant on is a video and maybe some audio, headphones and stuff. So that's a completely different approach from what HR should be doing. I mean, used to be doing, or we're not everyone's in the office now. So parang how do you now take all these people's different personalities, and what about you? What's that part of you that allows you to do this kind of work, that you're able to determine where people fit, what roles would be best for them, and essentially if you would hire them or not? What part of you helps determine that?
Yeah, I thought about that, and I think what it is a very what is it? A very intentional listening. Okay, it's intentionally listening to the cues, to what people are saying, the sound bites, what their needs are. I mean, it's not that we didn't do that before. I think now it's more acute. It's more intentional. You really have to exert more effort because, as you say, before you can have you see the person three-dimensional. You see he comes into the office, you can feel him, touch him, hear him. But now you just, as you said, hear and maybe see, but you don't see the whole body. You don't see you know the nuances, the nonverbals. Okay. So it's a very intentional listening with not just your ears but your heart, almost, no? The sensitivity to understand and being more human. I think that's what it is. It's being more human. And so that, I mean, now when we do, well, I'm not doing any actual interviews at this point, but I would imagine that it is. I mean, I did interview some of my colleagues who are still doing the interviews, and they're doing interviews the way that you and I are talking, right? So if the other guy isn't able to communicate properly, what kind of an interview are you going to get? You're not going to get much data, right? So now I think if you're going to be interviewed, if you're the interviewing going for a job, you have to be able to exert more effort in making them understand who you are and what you can do in a more, three-dimensional way. Because otherwise, it's just a photo of a person and lips moving. And you don't see anything else. Yeah.
I like to. Sorry, go.
And you don't. I was gonna make a joke, and you don't smell the person.
I just want to reiterate, hindi ako yun, ha?
I know. I just thought
I know. I love it. So, okay. I wanted to ask also, was there a time when you screened an applicant and it was, you came out of the interview going, I didn't even think about that? Or were there any specific moments or times that you were doing an interview and it was just kind of like, wow, this is something I never expected today?
Let's see. I think, yeah, one that I remember, and, there's a lot of experiences when you're in HR because you're always seeing so many people, no?
And people, like you really get to know them.
Yeah. And there was one interview actually, which almost got me off my, kind of like caught me flat-footed. And I guess this was a gentleman who had come in and I can't remember the position he was interviewing for. But when he came in, he took a very aggressive stance. Okay. I mean, usually you have a table in front of you, or if many times I don't put the table in front of me anymore. And so you're in sort of like sitting face to face, nothing in between you. So you actually see the person in full dimension. This case, actually, we had a table in front of us, and it was a small table, but it's not a huge desk. Mm-hmm. And the guy basically intruded into my personal space. Okay, so it's like, in my face. Needless to say, I didn't hire the person, but it was like, really now? I mean, this kind of thing happens? And I was thinking either the guy had a terrible coach. Okay, somebody coached him to say you must be assertive or whatever.
Pumasok ka lang at kunin mo yung gusto mo.
Yeah, no. So it was a terrible coach, whoever it was, no. But it was also almost, I thought, in this day and age where you have diversity and you have, I was thinking maybe this guy was, in a way, harassing me sexually because I was a woman. Okay, because
yes.
He was overtly like, in my face, and it's like commandeering dominating my space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I guess that's the one that I remember very distinctly, because it was like, are you kidding me? This happens? I mean, you're supposed to be on good behavior, right?
Exactly. Parang,
Yeah.
Parang, okay, wow, you took the liberty. All right. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's not gonna look good on your application then.
Oh, I mean, he was out the door. I mean, it was like I wanted to,
Oh my gosh. So,
and and and
sorry, go.
even as I was moving, to create space,
Use.
still there was that very aggressive intrusion into. So that's a tip, guys. I mean, you have to keep a respectable distance because you don't want to intrude on another person's space by showing disrespect or
Mm-hmm.
being misconstrued to be something else. So that's a clear,
A clear
uh,
no-no.
yeah.
So, Faye, that's what I realized also is something that I love to discuss with my friends. I had the opportunity as well to work with an American production company, and I did notice that the culture is so different when I'm doing Filipino or work in the Philippines. And I really did. I mean, some people are probably gonna comment to me after this podcast, but I really do feel like Filipinos, we're sensitive. Like we're very sensitive to a lot of things, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I also say sometimes it might be a challenge to handle. So I want to know, parang, what are you seeing in terms of the work personalities between here and in other countries, like what you've experienced?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. We're all different, I mean, I think that's what makes the world go around. It flavors our life experiences by the very fact that we're all different. Okay, and there is a lot of people there's a lot of uh, feedback about how Western culture is more assertive, more aggressive, more upfront, and you can call a spade, whereas an Asian is more quiet, more almost purposive, even in how they talk. There's very respectful, and these are all really wonderful characteristics. I think what has helped me over the years, and when I coach, I always mention this, is that foremost should be respect for the other person. And so when you have the respect for the other person, then you're able to actually flip some of our hardwired thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm so small, I'm not good enough or whatever, especially when, it comes to speaking English, maybe English is not our first language. So when you're speaking to a Western person where English is their first language, you feel almost inferior. Um, yeah. So, and I think that's what you mean by sensitive, no? Um, but sensitivity could also mean that you're more attuned, to what the other person's circumstances might be. So you adjust.
That's what I noticed being able to see other countries as well and the work environments. It's really you have to learn how the culture deeply works. And sometimes here we do have this sort of inferiority complex. I have that too. I do feel that sometimes that when I'm working with international, I still have this ingrained notion that they're kind of like my house guests, but I don't have to go all the way into that extent, right?
No,
Parang,
no, no.
but you do want to be hospitable. It's a very Pinoy
Yeah,
trait.
and that's a good trait, right? So we should encourage that trait. It doesn't mean you're subservient. It just means that you are of service, and that's actually the biggest heart. I think the more generous heart. So you see how I think I like to flip it because sometimes it looks like it's negative, but actually it's not really negative. There is a gift behind it. Just like COVID, I said, no, COVID is adversity. It's terrible. But within that, there is a gift, and that's what we need to discover. And ganun din ang tao, no? So when you're interviewing a person, okay, I always say every person has a gift, okay, or that fire or that flame that's flickering in them, but maybe it's dim at times. It's not strong enough. We can't see it. Sometimes it's super strong. You want to kind of tame it. But I think everybody really has, something good in themselves. And that, as a perspective, if you're interviewing something, our role as human resources or our role as the interviewer is to try and see that gift. And the role of the interviewee naman on his side is to kind of like showcase it. Okay. And more so now that we're virtual. Now, how do you showcase that? How do you show yourself?
In this show, we do want people to gain that confidence in being able to now approach a company or even just walk into an interview and have that sort of understanding that they already have some insight into what the person on the other side of the table would be thinking. Um, Now, I think to give this a little bit of a spin, one of the most common job questions during a job interview is, how do you see yourself in 5 years? What if the applicant wants to open their own business in 5 years? What if they tell you, well, I do plan in my third year to just take what I can and then start my own consulting firm or something like that. Like, if you don't see any longevity with this possible person, but you do see them doing something well for your company, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've always had a renegade way of thinking of things like that. Okay, I actually see that as good. Okay, because especially today, where there's no more, I mean, you don't hear of lifelong roles in a company. Very rare, right? You don't hear of, your first job and only job and you stay there till you retire or till you whatever. Now it's like you flip and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think what happens when it's not good is when you flip too often, too soon. Okay. The too often is not an issue for me. I've gone through, I don't know, maybe I don't remember now, but it's obviously not just one job. I've had several jobs. And that is perfectly fine. I mean, as long as I think you stay within a role for long enough, and as an employer, okay, if a individual can stay with you for at least 2 years, you're pretty good, okay? Because in that 2 years, that person has been able to give you good productivity. I mean, that's great, right? Okay, I don't think we need you to be married to the company.
I'm just so happy that you're saying that nga. Because that's really the anxiety people have. Na parang para silang ikakasal na sa company because they expect to be giving 100% of their time to really like squeeze all the energy out of them for that future. But hearing you say na 2 years is good, basta magaling ha.
Yeah, yeah. At saka hindi ka na mabulakbol, no? Huwag ka namang bubulakbol. Kasi obviously that's not good, no? It's not good for you. I mean, it's not good for the company. But you were saying about the 5 years. It's interesting because if the person says, I want to set up my business in 5 years, that's great. That means, what that tells me? It means that you have initiative, you have an entrepreneurial spirit, which is so important today. Okay, having an entrepreneurial spirit and being a bit being a lot more bold and not so risk averse, because sometimes if you're too risk averse you cannot change. But those are characteristics and attitudes and actually which are good for an organization. But as I said, no, wag lang yung 6 months tapos umalis na. Kasi yung 6 months, alam mo yon, masama din yan sa pag tiningnan ng interviewee na, about 6 months and 6 months and 6 months. There's something wrong with this guy. No, I'd rather not take you in. Okay. Now, it could happen that you may have done it once in the 6 months. Okay, I'm forgiving naman yung company because it could have happened that, my gosh, you went into that role not knowing what the role was. And so it's better you leave, diba, than hang around. So I kind of have a very, as I said, renegade attitude towards it. But it's because I see that there is still, again, a gift there, right? So if they stay with you for 2 years, basta maganda naman yung 2 years na yan, and why not? And by the way, Jules, dati, it's like 3 years yata before a person starts his productivity goes down. Okay? Kasi nagiging masyadong kampante, masyadong complacent, no? Parang it's so easy to do na parang, di ba? That was before. I don't know, baka ngayon it's even less, no? But so kaya nga yung HR and yung company has to also look at how do I keep engaging this person by having either cross-posting, yung mga ganyan, no? Or training to keep the person interested in.
everyone's a puzzle piece. And I think HR is a sort of way to find where that spot fits.
Yes.
Yun nga, it's not because you are not good at one thing that HR is not gonna take you, but what you're essentially saying is highlight what you're good at. The millennial mindset is really heavily bordered or heavily linked to authenticity. I want to know what type of experiences do you have with the people that you have interviewed that made you feel like, wow, this is the authenticity I want. And also on the other side, have you had any experiences that stood out that you're like, ooh, okay, this is not the authenticity I want?
Yeah. Okay. So authenticity means na the baliktad, the kabaliktaran is, you're faking, okay, or you're making bola, okay. So I think over the years, na pipick up ng interviewer yan, no, pag nagbobola yung tao, no? And there are cues. Parang it sounds too good to be true, or parang almost like he's kissing up, or he's telling you what he thinks you want you to hear.
Yeah, gets.
Yeah. Okay, so actually that's part of being authentic. I want them to ask me that question because, especially since it is something of that's passion for that individual, no, and to answer your question, that gives me an indication of how authentic the person is. And I think organizations today, likewise, want to be authentic. Of course, with a caveat, as I said, no, wag lang yung bastusan. No?
So, to add to that, I think, say for example, the most basic question is, why should we hire you? So, of course, for you, I mean, you get all these kinds of answers. This is really where people start having their own time to do their monologue. So, have you heard of any specific notable answers or things that stuck with you?
I don't remember the actual details now, but if it is like a monologue, I did this and I did, then I kind of like think, okay, this guy seems to be too desperate. Okay. So it should be just, just enough. Okay. Because remember, we've been in a conversation already and I've asked you several questions now. So there's enough data, no? You gave me that data already. So if you rehash it, it can sound, ano na rin eh, no? Parang, hello,
parang we've covered this.
We've covered that, no? But I like it when, for example, and if I can give you an example, like as a recent college graduate, no? Because these are the ones, as I said, I like hiring young people and actually training them rather than hiring always very senior people already. Of course, you do have to hire senior people as needed. But okay, so the problem with a recent graduate is wala pang work experience, diba? So how do you, as a recent graduate, how do you actually show to the interviewee that you have, the skills or the competencies and the attitudes that that would be okay for this job? Okay, so this recent college graduate basically said something like, I don't really have qualifications, because I don't, whatever those qualifications might be. But when I was in school, I held 4 different, or whatever the number is, different organizations. These are their extracurricular activities. And I also manage a full course load of subjects. So here you have a person sharing with you that he was active in 4 extracurricular organizations, and then he was also able to handle his grades. So that gives me, as an interviewer, an indication that he knows how to multitask and he knows how to prioritize responsibilities, and he could be a good person to come in an organization, because he would probably be able to have effectively prioritize a significant component for success.
So I like to imagine that you sitting behind the desk doing an interview is akin to a baseball player who's setting up the pitcher on the pitcher's mound, and you're about to throw a ball, And your skills are you're able to throw a variety of curveballs towards the direction of the interviewee. So, what are some of your favorite questions that you like to ask applicants or candidates? You personally.
Yeah, okay. I always ask a mix, okay, of what you call behavioral questions, okay, and situational questions. So in the behavioral questions, I always like to ask things like, um, when did you have, a problem that you had to solve? Parang ganon, no? So it's always like a difficult question, a difficult thing that you had to be confronted with, um, or a controversial question type of thing that you have been confronted with. And I normally ask that in what you call a behavior technique, which is, what was the situation? Tell me about a situation where you found yourself faced with, doing the right thing or doing the thing that your boss asked you to do. Okay,
Yeah.
because that is almost like, it gives you an indication of how the person will react, or how has he reacted. Because I'm asking it in such a way, have you, tell me about a situation where,
And it's
blah
a
blah blah.
real life scenario.
Yeah, because the behavioral type of interviewing questions, and many of you probably, even yourself, I'm sure, Jules, have heard that. So we can hear that. That's actually a behavioral question. They're asking you to tell you of a specific situation. What did you do, and what was the reaction? Okay, so that's a kind of I guess curveball question that I like to ask. Something that is provocative in terms of morals in a way, and honesty. I also like to ask situational questions, which are largely hypothetical or almost ambiguous. Okay, and these are the types of questions which allows me to see how fast you think, okay, and how you respond to those curveballs. Okay, so for example, I would ask something like, "Well, how would you handle it if your team resisted an idea that you had proposed, and you were so in love with that idea?" Okay,
Oh,
okay,
are you
it's
asking me?
no, no, that's a question.
Because I felt like, oh nga, no? Okay,
Okay, you can
sorry.
answer it. So, but that's a question that I would ask. It's almost like a curveball, meaning that it's a bit ambiguous, but it's asking you to actually think, di ba? Parang
Yeah,
ikaw, yan ang reaction mo. How do I say? You don't know, di ba?
yeah.
So you're quickly trying to think of the correct answer now. And what I'm trying to get there would be how you react. Okay, that's one. Um, and what you actually do, or what you actually would do. Okay, so are you going to react and say, "Oh my God, I love this idea"? And when you love an idea so much, you're almost like ready to say, "What the?
Oo.
Don't you understand? This is
Baby ko
a fantastic
yan.
idea." Oh,
Oo.
di ba, baby ko yan? Ano kayo? No? Hindi nyo ba nakita mga, or whatever. No? Those are your thought bubbles. No, you're not saying it out loud. Or do you try to, or will you tell me, if you're the interviewee, will you tell me, um, pause and say, you know I know I would really feel bad, and that's fine, because you will. That's a natural reaction, no? So showing that reaction and being aware of that reaction is already maturity for me. Okay, and let's say the person says, I would probably feel bad at first, but then I would wonder. Now, I would be curious, why is it that they don't like the idea? What am I going to do about it? I want to find out about it. I want to listen to what they say to me, why. Okay, and I want to show respect for that idea, for why their thought or their ideas, diba? Kasi ano yun eh, that tells you already a level of maturity of the individual. It tells you that the person knows how to think quickly. Yeah, sure, he's human, so he will feel bad, but he doesn't wallow in that bad negative emotion. He quickly jumps out of that emotion and tries to be,
Detaches.
yeah,
Oo.
exactly, and tries to solve it.
I feel like millennials really are the ones right now who are um, saying, if I can't be fulfilled in this job, why do I even want it? Parang if there's that I guess that passion that has to align with a much more isolated personality. I read somewhere that people are more willing now to be individuals. There's a higher contrast in people that they're allowing themselves to be truly themselves. And that's where I feel like the corporations also are adjusting na what are the new personalities of this generation. We can see it all now on the internet. All these different kinds of people are surfacing, all these different ideas as well. So I think nga, na parang without the internet basically revolutionized the workforce's mindset. So what's one thing that you would tell someone who's about to go into a job interview to ask themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because I would generally say, okay, you have to prep yourself. Okay, so in that prep would include, what I said earlier about knowing what that company is. Okay, and then also, alam mo yung eto salamin, tingnan mo sarili mo. Okay, di ba ganun siya, no? Ibig sabihin, mag-reflect ka rin ng sarili mo. Okay, and what are you going to reflect? You're going to reflect on what are my strengths? What do I have to give this company? Okay, what is that thing that I can shine on? Okay, um, the other one is what's my weakness? What are those things which I don't know or I'm not good at? Okay, uh, and then you look at what is this company looking for? Okay, so you try to match it, no? Ima-match mo. Again, with all authenticity, no? Hindi mo naman bobolahin yung tao kasi that will come out. No? And believe me, B, if you made bola and kalusot, when you get there, you're going to have a lousy time, right?
You're not happy.
You're not happy, right? So that's all, again, being part of being true to yourself and being authentic. But those are the things that I would recommend you do, no? Yung knowing what the company is, salamin, no, mirror, take a look at your reflection in the mirror and ask yourself those questions. And I guess also understand where your passions lie and understand also, where you kind of like draw the line. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean, me, for example, I would never, work for a company that is counter to my values. I wouldn't personally work for a cigarette company because I believe that cigarettes are bad for the health. Okay, so many times I've been offered actually a position, chief HR for a cigarette company, and I basically said, yeah, I know the match would be great, and it would be wonderful for you to have me. Okay, may konting yabang, no? For you to have me because you have to also know your value, di ba?
Yeah, know your worth.
Yeah, but sorry, I don't think I want to spend my time and effort and my energy with a company that is contrary to my personal value. So yan ang mga sinasabi mo. Pag sinitingnan mo salamin, yun ang mga tatanong mo sarili mo. Okay, so
I love it. It's hard truth. For some people, it's the hard truth that they need to swallow. Diba? Na parang kung hindi ka bagay, ba't ka nang dun?
Yeah. Pero in the same breath naman, sasabihin ko rin sa'yo, especially to the millennials who are just starting out, wala ka pa masyadong pagyayabang. Okay? Sure, you have talent and all that stuff, but you're not yet tested. So, ang palagi ko sinasabi din, you also have to temper your ambitions. No, it's great to be aspirational. You to have aspirations and ambitions. That's fantastic. No, and don't lose that. But if you walk in the door, and this is actually where I have a turnoff. If you walk in the door and you totally say, "I want to be the manager," okay, or I want to have a car, I want to have this, I want to have that, or I want a salary like this. Actually, that's a bit of a turn off when you start off your conversation, your interview, with things that, what are you going to give me? Diba? Wala ka pang wala pa eh. No, you still have to prove yourself.
Wala kang leverage.
Wala ka pang leverage. That's the right word. Wala ka pang leverage.
You really have to know at what level you're entering the company na nga. It's like joining a football team or a basketball team or any kind of team. Parang you really
Exactly.
have to know, just because you really enjoy the sport, you have to know you can't just play with any team.
Right, right, right.
So
At
I,
saka ano
sorry,
din,
go.
meron ka rin training, di ba? So there's that training that you still have to get trained, no? So you still have to get experience. You start off, di ba, even in a basketball team, or I mean, I'm actually 5'1", but I played on my high school team, but because of my height, I couldn't do the forward. I was always a guard. Okay,
Nice.
and that's fine, right? But I was number 6, so meaning I would get called in as a replacement. Okay, but that's fine. No, that's part of how you learn and play, right?
Yep.
So ganun din yan, no? You don't expect to be the top guy right off. You kind of like say, okay, I want to be the top guy. What do I need to do to get there? But for now, I'm going to be here and I'm going to do it well.
I like
Diba?
that. Yeah. There are ranks that need to be. I mean, a lot of companies now that are modern are generally flat in terms of the hierarchical status nga. But
Yeah.
if you base it on respect for people, that's where you'll really see the rank. That's where you have to respect it nga naman, because they're the ones sailing the ship much longer than anyone else.
Yeah. And actually, it's not rank. It's not rungs. It's the
It
I look at it as parang career paths today is
it's
zigzagging.
it's a map now.
Yeah, it's zigzagging. No, it's not yung pag ganun like a ladder. Na
Uh
you have to throw the guy off so that you can climb up the ladder. No, it's not like that. You increase your competency levels and your experience so that you get broader and then you can move and.
That's also something that I want to emphasize with people who are listening to us right now. I feel like yung unang perception kasi ng career for some people is a straight line. And growing up, and I'm sure you will also attest to that, is that it's not a straight line. You can't climb a mountain with a straight line. You have to follow the paths that are there and traverse the things that you actually can't move out of your way, and find the right route to get to where you need to go. So I really love what you've been telling everyone in this podcast, Faye, na it's really about now the sort of interpersonal skills that people have as well, which will help them get the job. So before we end, I do have maybe a question on where can people find more of what you're teaching? Because I personally am because of my dad, Stephen Covey fan.
Oh,
So that's
fantastic.
yeah, that's why. So to me, it's like that's where I find my resource as well for leadership and guidance. So for you, Faye, what would you say are the directions or the places where people can find what you're preaching, what you're teaching, and where can we find you online in case someone wants to maybe propose something?
Yes. Well, I'm on LinkedIn. Okay. And then so yeah. Okay. What are some of the best resources? Um, I'm a Google fan. Okay, so I Google almost everything. Okay, but for things like this, I look into a lot of the World Economic Forum stuff. Okay, and why do I do that? It's because the world of work is changing, and they seem to be looking at how the changes are coming in. Um, like for example, they did that whole study on what are the 10 top skills. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I,
so that's always good to know because if you're just now coming into the job market, it's good to know what are the skills that will remain hot. Okay, because the old skills are going to, that can be taken over by AI, robotics, all that stuff. No, but one of the things that can't be taken over by the robotic world that's about to come, is really things that are more enduring. So it's like creativity. It's more the complex problem solving. It's more EQ. At least not for a while. No, I don't know if they're going to have artificial intelligence that will already be able to feel emotions and sense emotions and stuff like that. Maybe they can because emotions also run for patterns.
And
Because that's
facial recognition.
Yeah, correct. So patterns ang tinitingnan, no? Pero the human being is so complex, diba? We could be talking to you and I could be smiling, but I could be seething inside with anger, right? But I could be showing you this beautiful face, no? So I don't think that hindi yan yata makuha pa, no? Pero bilang human beings, makikita natin yun, no? So where do you go? Go to those types of sites. Now for interviewing, there's this group called Glassdoor, which has a lot of really good reference materials. It's got all those what to do types of things. So what to do in an interview, how to handle an interview, what to prepare, what types of questions to prepare for, and stuff like that. So if you don't have a coach or somebody who can coach you, it could be a older brother or sister who's done the job interviews already. They could tell you what's going on.
That's a great one. Get a coach.
Yeah. And that coach could be just really your older brother or older sister who's now in the workforce, right? Or it could be friends, stuff like that. And by the way, there's such a good thing also about reverse mentoring. Okay, so the young teaching the older generation. That's reverse mentoring.
I have never heard the term reverse mentoring. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's really the way forward today. And believe me, I'm part of this association, which is the top type, the top guys, the top echelon of corporations. And we did a couple of was this conference topics or fireside chats where it was a discussion between the older CEO and owner of the company or the boss, the leader, saying, I don't know how to manage these millennials. What am I going to do? I don't understand them. They're they want this, they want that. And then the millennial also saying, I don't really understand the old guys, blah blah blah. And one of the best tools really is reverse mentoring. And that is teaching. So it's the young teaching the older generation. It's actually coaching and teaching each other, because the older person may not understand, all this technology, and the millennials are digital savvy. They're digital natives, diba? So that's one good way into reverse mentoring. And then from there, you start to understand, you interact with each other, and you start to see, he doesn't mean pala. It doesn't, when he says he wants to leave the company, it's not because he's being flippant. He's actually getting bored. And why is he getting bored? Because, my goodness, the systems are too slow or whatever.
Masyadong red tape or whatever.
Yeah. So that if you get them both talking and listening to each other, then that's where you develop a new knowledge, and better understanding. So those are the resources that you can go to.
I love it. It's really it feels like you just shared with me a treasure trove of information that I can't wait to Google. I did write a lot on my notepad while you were talking. Okay. So I'm really appreciative of that.
It's been fun talking with you. So I hope it was some value to you.
Faye, my gosh. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I really, that's not even a question. What we've talked about today, I do feel like is going to be something that someone out there is going to hear before they go into their job interview. And because they heard this conversation, they get the confidence and the insight coming from your answers. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, so good luck to everybody who did listen. And I hope some of those things that I mentioned will be of good value to you. Simple lang naman, so be authentic and be purposive and intentional in what you look for and prepare for.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Faye. It's been such a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jules.
Thanks for looping us in.
It was fun. Thank you.
And that ends our episode for today. Please listen or download our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Podbean. And you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. Please follow us on our official social media accounts. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This has been Jules Rodriguez, and this is Loop Me In.